Well, yeah, I chose that image because I was in Uruguay in November, and it was we were staying in this kind of strange atmosphere-wise hotel in the middle of Montevideo, and it was the building directly outside my room, and it's just a very beautiful. I think it's the 1930s building, and it's sort of behind it was the River Plate, so it had that juxtaposition. It had a magical quality about it, and I just wanted to see it again, so I used it for as a piece of cover work. Well, I've known Brian for at least 10 years. First time I worked with him was on the Greenpeace ship when it was moored in the Thames, and we did this piece for choir and bells, which I think we both enjoyed working on. When Richard and I were making Everyday Robots, we invited him in just to listen and see what he thought, and it's quite a big thing to get Brian Eno to come in. Being that he's a sort of he's a producer's producer in many ways, and he seemed to like what he was hearing, and plucked up the courage to ask him to sing, because it's one of those things you never hear from Brian Eno. You hear about his great production work and his sort of endless stream of interesting ideas, but you don't ever hear him singing, and actually he's got a fantastic voice, and he loves singing. He's got a choral group that meet every Tuesday at his house, which is in my neighbourhood. And I thought it was just really nice to get him to sing, and that's why. The 7-point star. Well, firstly, it's a very beautiful geometric resting image, but I kind of got into it partly because the number 7's an extremely powerful magical number in mathematics, and also it was used by John Dee in his preparation when he was developing Enochian magic. But you'll find the number 7 everywhere in all religions. It's a really powerful number. Well, yeah, I'm definitely endlessly curious when it comes to music, and I in a way I do prefer to listen to something I haven't heard before. But there's loads of stuff I go back to. A lot of Glenn Campbell's songs I love to listen to. I love the music of Vaughan Williams and Michael Tippett and William Walton. I love Mahalia Jackson, Stockhausen. I find that really always surprises me when I listen to it again. Just because I listen to new music doesn't mean I don't listen to stuff that I'm very familiar with, because some stuff is so sort of it takes many listens to actually understand what's going on. So I don't think I necessarily am either way, but I'm always looking for new stuff. That's true. Well, the string tunings are exactly the same on an ordinary guitar. I took the top 2 strings off basically because I've never learned how to play bar chords. When I first started playing the guitar, I needed to learn it really quickly. It was when we first formed Blur, and I worked out that if you played first position E, and then you put your thumb on each fret going up, you could play the major and minor of every chord. So it was a way of cheating, really, and I didn't need the top 2 strings. That's why I got rid of them, and I've never learned how to do bar chords. So I do sometimes play on a 6-string guitar, but for writing I always use a 4-string guitar. Oh, funnily enough, talking of Omar Suleiman, I'm maybe going to Istanbul in September to produce his next record. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that enormously. Yeah, I'd love to do something with all that music I recorded in Syria. I mean, it'd be wonderful to put a record out which somehow helped those musicians, because their life today is a pretty wretched one, and it's very, very sad what's happened in Syria. Upsets me a lot. What inspires me? Well, I mean, it's that, it comes back to that being curious, and you know, there's always something new to learn from working with someone you've never played with before. Yeah, I mean, I'm a student really, so anyone I can kind of learn something from, I'm very eager to work with. I've been into music from Mali for several years before I was asked by Oxfam, well, it must have been in like 1999, I was asked to go there and kind of, I don't know really what they wanted me to do there, but I was very certain I didn't want to go there and just sort of walk around. And I said, well, I'll only go if I go there as a musician, because that's what I do, that's what I know about. And they were brilliant. They organised this incredible trip for me, where I met, on my first day, I met Tamani Diabate, who's like one of, probably the greatest kora player alive. And I took back then it was a DAT player. I took 2 DAT players, and me and my engineers, we just travelled around southern Mali, listening to all this unbelievable music for 2 weeks. Had the time of my life really, and the way it changed my life. And then I came back to London and I listened to all the stuff, and then I sort of made this collage of all the sounds that I'd heard and tried to make them into coherent tunes, and that's how Mali music came about. I just write songs. I don't write specifically for anything. I mean, they're my songs. I write them, and I write them for myself. You know, it just depends where I am, in a sense, to how they end up being kind of completed. Because I mean, the original songs are usually just me on the piano or the guitar, very much like this record is very much piano and guitar driven. My songwriting is based like that, and it just depends who I'm working with at the time, what material I use, but I don't write specifically for anyone. Yeah, it's just one of those numbers that sort of, my first studio was in Unit 13, and then we made the record 13 in Unit 13, so that's why it was called 13. And then when I moved my studio to a much bigger building about 8 years later, it turned out that the number on the street was 337, which adds up to 13, which was a weird coincidence. It's just one of those numbers that you know, I find myself sort of living with it a lot. I can't really explain why. I just I like it. It's like 7. I like 7 as well. it's an emotional thing. It's not rational. I'm pretty pleased with, you know, there's always a couple of songs that I feel I could have done better, or where it shouldn't have been put on the records. The record I'm least proud of is the first ever Blur record, but I don't really consider that as that we were a truly sort of coherent songwriting band at that time. I think after Modern Life is Rubbish, every record had its merits, but to be honest with you, I always feel I can do a lot better. I never feel like I've done anything anywhere near as perfectly as I would like to. So, in that sense, I always feel there's room for improvement. I'd like to go back to the kind of where my family came from, because I'm not quite sure on my dad's side exactly where that is. So I think it's kind of sort of France originally, So maybe 17th century France. I don't know. Not really much different, other than there were less musicians in the room, but Richard Russell was there every day, playing rhythm. I suppose lyrically, this is a much more personal record, so there was less sort of deliberating about the content of songs. It was very much my decision, but apart from that, no different. I mean, it was me writing songs. No different.